Well, good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery here. It is a beautiful Friday morning, November 18th, 2022. We get together with our distribution partners most weekday mornings at this time. Now, next week, we will not be getting together Thursday or Friday because of the holiday, but we get together and talk about strategies, tips, techniques. We're trying to constantly monitor what common questions or topics are coming up when we exchange with each of you to make sure that we're covering it for the entire group. And this is somewhat that plus a little bit more. So let's go ahead and get into the agenda, which should be shared on your screen at this time. So the topic, which I guess is half the story, we'll get to the other half in a moment, is we do need to get ready and review all clients that you've enrolled this year. So in addition to the monthly reconciliation, which we recently have started, and we've had really good feedback on those of you that have gone through that, we want to make sure that we've not left any clients behind. So as a white label partner, clients contract with you. You have a contract with us through the white label partnership relationship, but the client contracts are with you. And I know you all are diligent and care, but we've got to make sure we don't leave any clients behind. The typical promise that you're making to the client, if you're using the agreement template provided, is that you'll work with them to help them raise at least $100,000. We all guarantee that. And then the promise that the client, one of the promises that the client's making is that they'll work with you to raise at least $100,000. And so that's a really mutually beneficial relationship, right? Because they know that they'll continue to work with you until they raise $100,000 to start or grow a business. And then you can anticipate receiving around $12,500 from each client when you combine the deposit and the performance fee, which of course you can set those rates. So the point is, we want you to schedule a call with us, and let's go through every client that has been enrolled. I mean, so this is going to take a little while, but if they've not been funded, we need to make sure that we're getting their files populated into the DropBox folder, because there is typically, so there's two types of funding, right? There's the first tranche of financing, which should happen right away, but that's not the end goal. The end goal is to get each client at least $100,000. Well, what do we know that it takes for that to happen? Well, we'd like financial literacy to happen, but we're not going to force that down their throats, but it's made available. We do know that we need to build a loan package. So we need to gather the documents from them that you should be familiar with. If not, we can help you with that, support you on that. So we should gather the documents that the client does have and get them into the designated Dropbox, so that our funding committee can review the client's files and say, okay, based on what we see, here's what's next. Here, we recommend we go to funding right away, and here's where, or here are the issues. So what you can do, what I think you should be doing as a white label partner, is making sure that every client that has enrolled has either been funded, which is stated here, or we at least have a plan to get them funded. Because it's too good to be true to think that every client that enrolls immediately is going to qualify for $1 million or 10 million or even 100,000. But what we want to do is offer to improve their financial literacy, which we have a great program to do that. We want to help build their loan package, which starts with gathering the documents from them. And those are specific documents, not all or nothing, and they go into the designated Dropbox. And then lastly, what we do is help them address credibility issues so that they can get approved for the funding that they want. So again, in summary, we need to make sure that there's no clients left behind. So if you can schedule with us, you can get started by creating a little spreadsheet if you want, every client that's enrolled. And if they've not been funded at least 100,000, then we're not done with them. So let's say that the client's not actively engaged or wants to quit. Well, there's a bilateral promise, an agreement that we have offered to help them, and they've offered to receive that help. So let's go ahead and talk about what happens if they won't engage, because that will happen in some cases. So if that client is under contract with you, and assuming you're using the white label partner access to capital template without significant changes, then we have a pretty good understanding of what's promised by both parties. So there's certain things that you've promised to do and certain things that they've promised to do, as I've stated before. Just to reiterate, one of the things that you've promised to do for them is to work with them, and we're here to help you. That's our relationship with you, to get them at least 100,000. They've promised to continue working with you until they've reached that amount. So what happens if you have a client that quits? And so we want to be very careful in the words that we choose to make sure that it's accurate and descriptive. And so instead of the word quits, we'll call it a breach. So let's say that a client comes to you and says, oh, never mind, I don't want to do this anymore. Well, that is considered a breach. I realize the layperson may call it quitting, but it's a breach of agreement because there's a set of bilateral promises made in the agreement, one of which is that we're going to work with them to raise at least 100,000, as said twice before, and they've promised to participate until they raise at least 100,000. So if they quit or they stop participating, then that is a breach. So let's talk about maybe some best practices. Now, I'm not an attorney. We have attorneys on retainer that guide us and instruct us and help us, but I'm not an attorney, so I cannot give legal advice. So I'm giving procedural discussion points, but this is should not be interpreted as specific legal advice. All right, so if you have a client that has breached their contract, and again, I want you to get comfortable with these verbs because they're more accurate than just saying quits or not responding. A breach is indicating that the client promised to do something that they're not doing. Now, you and I are not mean people. If they have breached the agreement, what's our responsibility? We need to let them know that they've breached and offer to help them resolve it. And so that's what this bullet is saying. If they've breached their agreement, you need to let them know. When I say formal notification, that doesn't have to be a certified letter that's notarized, but you're sending them something very specific that could be through email or Adobe or however you want to get it to them. But to let them know, hey, Joe, you've breached the agreement and we want to help you resolve the breach. Now, keep in mind, the way that the attorneys wrote these agreements is you're going to be paid, or you should be paid, either way. So either the client participates and goes through the process and gets the capital raise of at least 100,000, and you get paid your deposit and performance fee, or if they quit, they still owe you the deposit and the performance fee. So it's not meant to be a disadvantage to the client, but it should be incentive for them to participate because they're going to end up paying either way. So if they quit, they're going to have to pay. But if they participate, they'll get the benefits and they'll pay. So it makes more sense to get the benefits. You ever know anyone? I knew it was actually my sister, I'm embarrassed to say, but she's much older than me. But when I was young, I heard my sister talking about how she was paying for some car payment. I don't remember. This is back in the 1970s or something. And it's like, I don't even remember you owning that car. And so she had bought a car, her and her husband bought a car, and I don't know what the issues were, it doesn't matter, but it got repossessed right away. Well, she kept paying for it for a long time, even though she didn't have the car. And so what happens is when someone breaches the agreement, they could lose the benefits. So my sister didn't have that car to drive anymore, but she still had to keep paying. So if these clients are breaching their agreement with you, it doesn't mean that they're not responsible for it anymore, but it does mean that then you don't have to perform any services. So it's not good for them. That's not what we want. So what do we want to do? Notify them of the breach and offer to help them resolve it. So how does that tie back to our first point? So any clients that you've enrolled in the past, if they're not actively involved, let them know, hey, we want you to get actively involved. And if nothing else, I mean, you can't force people to go through the modules and become more financially literate. That's valuable and it's available and it's good. But at the end of the day, you can't force them to become smart. But what we can do is say, hey, if nothing else, let's get your files that you do have uploaded into the designated Dropbox. And so that way we can get you to the funding committee and either get you funded or at least get a plan to get you funded. And so I think that'll be pretty well received. Now, you will have some people possibly that just, and I was talking to Bruce, well, texting Bruce this morning, he's online. He's got a client, Erica. Erica says, I quit. Last night, she decided, I quit. And it's like, well, Erica, that's not a smart thing to do. Is there a problem that we can help resolve? No, I quit. All right, Erica. So if you quit, if a client quits on you, then in other words, they're unwilling to resolve the breach. You've notified them of the breach, not being mean, just saying, hey, you're not doing what you promised to do. So one of the keys to success, and we see this with many of you, if you're emotionally involved, you'll probably not do well working in the financial space, especially often subprime finance. But if you separate emotions from fact, hey, there's an agreement. We want to do everything that we said in our agreement, and we expect you to do the things that you said in the agreement. If you're not doing what you said you would do in the agreement, we're going to let you know, and we want to resolve it, right? You're not hurting my feelings. But some people won't. Some people will just be ugly, mean, and we'll talk about some reasons for that at the bottom of the page. But if you have an Erica on your hands, and she's a smart woman, she's very intelligent, very successful, owns her own CEO of her own company, but some people make foolish decisions. And so if they're unwilling to resolve their breach, then understand you have what? A constitutional right to hold them financially accountable. So, and I'm getting ahead of myself because it's the bottom of the page, but some people are foolish, and I don't see that mean, but they just think, oh, I can just change my mind. Never mind that agreement. It's null and void. Cease and desist. It's not enforceable. It's like all bullshit. You know, they probably never took a law class, or if they did, they slept through it, and they're foolish, right? So it's not being mean. They don't know apparently how contractual law works the way that you and I do. So let's talk about how we handle when we have a breach, and then we'll get down to some key considerations to help you. So we don't do a lot of direct contracting with clients because we do some, but primarily we're working through distribution partners like white label partners. So my example isn't exactly apples and oranges to what we just talked about, but it's most relevant to us. So let's just kind of go through the process. So in our world, we have white label partners, and they're not promising to get $100,000 capital raise the way your clients are, but they're promising after an initial 30-day grace period to enroll at least 8 clients a month. And if they do that, then we have promised in writing to defer the license fee. So in other words, instead of charging white label partners $10,000, a license fee to become a white label partner, we say, well, there is that cost, but we'll defer it, and we'll defer it perpetually as long as you're active. And the contract reads, active is, again, after a 30-day grace period, enrolling at least 8 clients a month. So that's the deal. We make it very clear, and it's a great deal for white label partners because they have no upfront cost. They don't have to buy in. Now, clearly with us, our goal isn't to collect the license fee. So this is not a good analogy in that extent, because when you have a client under contract, your goal is to collect the performance fee from the client and the retainer. For us, it's different. We don't want to collect the license fee from the white label partners. We want them to comply, whereby they're making money instead of spending money. So that's the disclaimer. I know the incentives are different. We don't want white label partners to pay this, but you do want your clients to pay the performance fee. Understood. So we attempt, back to the analogy as it stands, so we attempt to reconcile with the white label partner to make sure that they're compliant. And if not, we try to resolve it. And so we have weekly calls one-on-one with our white label partners. We have these trainings, other resources. So we're trying to fulfill the agreement and helping white label partners even when they default. And so that ties up here. So if you have a client that has kind of dropped out or hasn't been active, don't dismiss them, but try to get them engaged and try to get them back on track so we can get them funded and you can get paid. All right, so we do though face some issues, probably like you do, where our client's a white label partner. In your case, your client is the small business owner. In some cases, they won't resolve it. And this is what Bruce is facing today with Erica. Erica just says, no, I quit. Well, often, and we'll get down to the bottom. Well, I'll wait for that because it's at the bottom. So if the client is unwilling to resolve, then what you should do is bill them. So what we do is we send an invoice through QuickBooks to the white label partner for $10,000, which is not a penalty or something. It's what they agreed to pay if they weren't active. In your case, you would send them an invoice, and you don't have to use QuickBooks, but you would invoice them for whatever they owe under the agreement, because everything needs to be consistent with their written agreement. It shouldn't be emotional. You should not be abusive. You shouldn't send them a bill for $1 million. You should send them a bill for what they owe you under the agreement, which is normally the deposit if not paid and the performance fee if not paid. So normally it's $12,500 that you'd be invoicing them for, even if they never received a penny of funding, because that's the deal. So in our world, we want to resolve it. So first, we don't want white label partners to default. We want them to be successful. And if they're not successful, we want to resolve it. And if we can't resolve it, then we invoice them, just like we would recommend you invoicing your clients. And so then we'll be flexible and work out some payment arrangements. But if they don't make some sort of payment arrangements, then we sue them. Now, we've learned a lot about lawsuits. And people think, oh, lawsuits, that sounds bad. No, that's a constitutional right that you have. It's called creditors' rights, because you're the extender of creditor services. So you have a right to use the court system to resolve debts against debtors, people that owe you money. It's okay. It's not mean. It's not aggressive. That's the way our society is set up. Now, we've learned a number of things about what to do and what to not to do when it comes to lawsuits. So we've had some painful lessons along the way, but we're really good at that. And you can either file a lawsuit against them yourself or get a litigation firm to do it. No, you should do it on a contingency only basis. The nice thing for you, same for us, is that when we write contracts, the contracts are holding both the company and the individual responsible. So let's go back to Bruce. Bruce got Erica. Erica's gone off rails. So Bruce most likely will be getting a demand notice over to Erica today. And if she doesn't resolve, she doesn't get back on track, then Bruce most likely will either directly or indirectly file suit against Erica. That suit will be both against her company and her individually, both. Now, one of the things that we've learned, and you probably know, is that a lawsuit is not a lawsuit is not a lawsuit. How you go about the litigation process makes a big difference. So first, filing in the right court system. Again, we've learned painfully, filing in the wrong court system, not good. Filing in the right court system, very good. And then we have what's called discovery. And again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm not here to teach you how to file lawsuits, but the discovery process provides additional information so you have in-depth understanding. Because technically, once you get to the court, to the court case itself, the day of trial, you should have already collected the information that you need to know. There shouldn't be any surprises. And so it's not unusual that you find that there's additional damages owed to you by going through the discovery phase. So I'll leave it at that, but the point I want to make is, like, again, using Erica as an example. I mean, Bruce but Bruce in this case has done everything he's promised to do for Erica to the letter, and Erica's gone off rails. She quits. We plead with her, please don't quit. Let's breach a contract. Let's finish what we started. No, I quit. Kind of like a toddler, right? No, I quit. I don't want to go to the potty. Well, then you need to have a process in place, because that there's money that's owed to you. Bruce is owed at least $12,500 from Erica. For him to just dismiss that is irresponsible. So instead, we go through a legal and appropriate means to resolve it, and that's the court system. All right, so let's wrap it up with some key considerations when trying to help defaulted clients. Again, we don't want anyone to default, right? What we're asking you to do is reach out to every one of your clients that's enrolled and encourage them to get involved. We want them to be successful. We want them to have a capital raise. If nothing else, help them get their data in to the DropBox so we can get them to the funding committee. That's what this is all about. What the conversation has turned, what to do when they won't engage. All right, so key considerations. We'll wrap up on this. Unfortunately, some people are not very financially literate, and they think that they can unilaterally, which means just on their own merit, just end a contract and there's no recourse. This is obviously and painfully wrong. And so, I mean, that's what Erica thinks, right? Erica thinks, I don't have to do this. I quit. Well, Erica, don't quit. That's craziness, right? Because now you still owe the money and you don't get the benefits. So, but some people don't realize that. Second, some people think that they can find some unrelated reason to unilaterally end a contract. Well, it's raining in China today, so I quit. It's like, what the fuck? I mean, what are you talking about? So if it doesn't tie specifically to the agreement, I got pink eye, I can't continue. It doesn't matter, right? It's not part of the agreement. So just be aware that some people don't know what you know, and they just think they can pull some excuse out of their ass, and it's why they don't have to continue. Some people are ignorant of the pain and cost of an aggressive civil litigation. And that's really, unfortunately, what you need to do, because some people just don't pay their bills. They don't live up to their contracts. And so that's where this discovery can come in. So an aggressive civil litigation, again, legal, ethical, moral, is going to be unfortunate for the defendant. And it's very unlikely that they're going to win. They may think, oh, you know, I've got something on you, or they just make up things that's unrelated to the agreement themselves. And it's just so unlikely that they're going to win a breach of contract lawsuit. So they're going to end up paying anyway. They're going to have court costs, and then they're not receiving the benefits. We don't want that. We want them to receive the benefits. Some people just don't even understand civil litigation and contractual breaches, and we see that so often. When people breach, they almost always justify it in their mind through some bullshit response. And it's like, man, I feel sorry for you. It's sad. You don't know what you're saying. You need to go talk to an attorney because you don't understand. Some people don't realize that the amount of lawsuit can actually increase. And so if you look at your agreement with your clients, if they get a capital raise outside of the program, they still owe you the performance fee. If they got PPP funds, they still owe you. If they get EIDL funds under contract, they still owe you. And so the amount they owe you may in fact go up as you're going through this discovery process. And then what our new investors are really emphasizing is going after criminal charges as well, because in some cases, people that breach an agreement, you can go through the prosecuting attorney and file criminal charges on them, where they could go to jail, because you can't go to jail for not paying a bill, but you can go to jail for criminal reasons. And some of these folks, I think there's a strong argument to say that they've acted criminally, theft, they've not paid. So there's just no reason to have clients at default. What we want to do is understand what they need, make sure they understand the agreement, and make sure they get funded, or at least have a plan to get funded. And so in summary, that's what we're asking each of you to do, is to please reach out to every contracted client and get them plugged in. And at least, let's get their files into DropBox so we can get them to committee. We're going to have huge funding committee meetings through the end of this year, because we need to clean up all of these folks that have been left behind that are not actively getting engaged. And if they don't actively get engaged, then you may want to consider leveraging your constitutional rights to hold them accountable. And that typically starts with getting a demand letter to them, a formal notification, and then escalating it. All right, well, Friday, we normally cut it short, and I didn't cut it short, so I apologize. I've got to run, but hopefully this is helpful. The bottom line is, every client that you've enrolled this year, we need to be focused on over the next couple weeks, get their files pulled together and get them into the funding committee. If they refuse, then we need to discuss that, and we need to hold them accountable, because they owe you money and you owe us money for those clients that have enrolled that have not performed. We don't need to pay out of pocket, but we need to enforce our constitutional rights for these people that are defaulting on agreements if we can't get them on track. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back Monday morning. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.